What if I told you that the very thing you're trying to avoid suffering is the one thing that could unlock your deepest power? That every time you numb it, run from it, or try to silence it, you're not escaping pain, you're escaping your own potential. Now, I know that sounds brutal, almost cruel, but that's exactly why Nietzsche's philosophy hits so hard. It's not sugar-coated. It doesn't promise you peace, happiness, or comfort. It offers something more dangerous and more valuable: awakening. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't just embrace suffering. He glorified it. He stared into the abyss of pain and said, "This is where strength is born." And unless we understand the dark reason behind why he believed that, and why we should too, we'll keep living shallow lives, afraid of every crack in the armor, every failure, every heartbreak, every moment that doesn't feel good. But life isn't meant to feel good all the time. It's meant to make you real. And for Nietzsche, suffering wasn't the enemy, it was the sculptor. Let's zoom in on why. Nietzsche believed that the deepest kind of suffering, existential suffering, is not just a byproduct of life, but a precondition for greatness. He watched the world around him cling to comfort, morality, religion, anything that made the unbearable parts of life easier to swallow. But Nietzsche wanted none of it. He rejected the idea that life owed us anything. He believed that truth, real truth, wasn't found in safety. It was found in the fire. And that fire is suffering, not the kind that breaks you, but the kind that builds you. Watching his own body crumble under illness, living in isolation, rejected by the academic world, Nietzsche didn't become bitter. He didn't quit. He transformed. He looked at his pain and said, "I need this. This is the hammer that will shape me." So the question becomes, do you see your suffering as a curse or as a calling?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about the last time you were in real pain. Not just physical, but the kind that hits your identity. The kind that makes you question your worth, your beliefs, your future. What did you do with it? Did you escape? Did you distract yourself? Or did you listen to it? Because that pain was telling you something. That's the dark secret Nietzsche uncovered. Suffering is information. It's the soul's way of screaming, "There's something here you need to face." But most people never listen. They medicate it, moralize it, or mask it with fake positivity. But Nietzsche invites us to do something radical, to lean into it, and to ask, why does this hurt? What does this reveal? Who could I become if I stopped avoiding this pain and started using it? Because if you use it right, suffering doesn't just teach you, it births you. It breaks down the weak parts of your ego, burns away the lies you've been living, and forces you to rebuild yourself on stronger ground. But here's where it gets even darker and more liberating. Nietzsche believed that most people's suffering is made worse by their illusions. Illusions of fairness, permanence, and control. We suffer more not because life is cruel, but because we expect it to be kind. We expect people to be good, outcomes to be predictable, and our lives to follow some logical path. But life isn't a story, it's a storm. And your suffering isn't a glitch in the system, it is the system. That's why Nietzsche said, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. But meaning doesn't come from escaping the storm. It comes from becoming the kind of person who can walk through it with their eyes open. So ask yourself, are you living in illusions right now? Are you expecting life to be easier than it is, more fair, more forgiving, more gentle? And what would happen if you dropped those expectations and accepted life on its own terms? Nietzsche called that acceptance amor fati, the love of fate. Not just tolerating what happens, but loving it, even the pain, especially the pain. Because everything that happens to you becomes material for your becoming. You lose someone, that grief opens your soul. You fail publicly, that shame becomes your humility. You collapse mentally, that breakdown becomes your awareness. But only if you choose to use it. And that's the difference between a victim and a creator. A victim asks, "Why is this happening to me?" A creator asks, "What can I do with this?" Nietzsche didn't want you to be happy, he wanted you to be honest. And honesty means admitting that life will hurt. It will break you. But in that breaking, you get a choice. Will you stay shattered, or will you rebuild yourself into something stronger? So now we get to the real reason Nietzsche embraced suffering, because he believed it was the only path to authenticity. Everything else, success, love, comfort, can be faked. But suffering is pure. It strips away your masks. It shows you who you are when there's nothing left. And in that moment, you meet your most honest self, the one who isn't performing, the one who's raw, and the one who's real. And that self, that forged, scarred, awakened self, is the only one capable of becoming something great. Not in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of your own conscience. The world might never understand your pain. It might never reward your struggle. But Nietzsche would say, so what? The point isn't to be understood. The point is to become undeniable. And that happens in the dark, in the fire, in the moments you think will break you but instead make you. So here's the question I leave you with. What if the worst thing that ever happened to you was the best thing for your becoming? What if your suffering isn't a detour but the path? And what would change in your life if you stopped avoiding it and started embracing it? Why pain is proof you're still alive, and how Nietzsche turned agony into power. Let's be honest, pain scares us. It always has. We're taught from childhood to avoid it, to see it as an enemy, a sign that something is wrong. But Nietzsche flips this completely. He doesn't just tolerate pain, he sees it as proof that you're still alive, that you haven't gone numb, that you're still growing. Pain, in Nietzsche's eyes, is not a malfunction. It's a signal, a divine, unavoidable checkpoint on the road to becoming something more. And if you can learn to read that signal, if you can learn to listen to it instead of silencing it, then you can use it. You can turn agony into power. That's what Nietzsche did. That's what you can do. But it requires something rare, the courage to stay conscious when it hurts. Because most people check out. They flee into habits, distractions, substances, relationships, anything to avoid the raw, naked ache of being fully awake. But pain, when faced with courage, becomes a portal, and a portal into your next evolution. Nietzsche's own life was soaked in pain. He suffered from chronic, debilitating illness. He lost friends. He was misunderstood, mocked, and eventually went mad. But what's astonishing is not that he endured all this, it's that he transmuted it. Every physical agony, every personal rejection, every breakdown became a seed for his philosophy. He didn't use pain as a reason to stop thinking, he used it as a reason to think deeper and to go where no one else was willing to go. He wrote, "Thus spoke Zarathustra while his body was failing." He penned beyond good and evil while isolated, nearly blind, abandoned. Why? Because he understood something most of us miss. Pain is a teacher that only speaks when everything else is silent. And the lesson is always the same: you are not done yet. So here's the question: what if your pain isn't there to punish you, but to push you? What if it's not a sign of failure, but a sign that you're still in the game, still alive, still becoming? The truth is, the more alive you are, the more you're going to feel joy, yes, but also fear, grief, despair. Nietzsche didn't see this as weakness. He saw it as depth. The person who can feel deeply even when it hurts is the person who can live fully. Because numbness is not strength. Avoidance is not peace. And comfort is not life. What Nietzsche wanted wasn't a pain-free existence. He wanted intensity. He wanted to feel the full spectrum of what it meant to be human, even if that spectrum burned him alive. Too many people ask the wrong question when they suffer. They ask, "How do I get rid of this?" But what if you asked, "What is this pain trying to show me about myself?" That's a terrifying question, but it's the only one that leads to growth. Because pain is not just in your body. It's in your soul. And it often points to the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. That ache you feel, that restlessness, that sadness, that anger, it's not random. It's a compass. And it's telling you something needs to change. Something inside you is ready to evolve. But that evolution requires you to stop numbing and start listening, to stop blaming and start building. Nietzsche knew this. That's why he didn't write about healing through comfort. He wrote about healing through confrontation. Confront the truth. Confront your past. Confront your illusions. Because only through confrontation do we gain clarity. And clarity is power. The kind of power that doesn't need applause or validation or certainty. The kind of power that comes from knowing, I walked through hell and I'm still here. That's real confidence. Not arrogance, not bravado, but the quiet, unshakable knowing that you've faced the worst and turned it into something beautiful. But let's go deeper. What does it actually mean to turn pain into power? It means using your suffering as raw material. It means alchemizing your trauma into purpose, your fear into ambition, your grief into compassion. Everyone wants to be strong, but no one wants to walk through the fire that forges strength. Nietzsche's greatness came not from escaping suffering, but from metabolizing it. He took it in, let it shape him, and poured it into his work. That's what you can do too. Your pain is not a waste. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. But only if you choose it. Only if you stop hiding from it and start working with it. So ask yourself, what pain are you still running from? What wound have you buried so deep that you've forgotten it's still bleeding? And what would happen if, instead of avoiding it, you faced it? What would happen if you looked your suffering in the eye and said, "You don't control me. You're my fuel"? That shift, that single, terrifying, liberating shift is the difference between a life of quiet despair and a life of unstoppable momentum. Nietzsche's legacy isn't just a set of ideas, it's a blueprint for survival. for creation, for transcendence. He proved that even in agony, even in isolation, even in madness, you can rise. You can write. You can become. Pain is not the end. It's the invitation. The monster and the mirror. Why facing darkness is the key to finding yourself. There's a line Nietzsche wrote that echoes like thunder across every soul brave enough to hear it. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. It's chilling, not because it's poetic, but because it's true, and terrifyingly so. What Nietzsche is warning us about here is not just external darkness, the evil in others, the chaos in the world, but the darkness inside us. The part we pretend doesn't exist, the shadow we bury under politeness, productivity, and performance. But here's the truth Nietzsche forces us to confront. Until you face the monster in the mirror, you will never be free. You may be liked, you may be successful, you may be safe, but you will not be whole. Because wholeness demands that you integrate the light with the dark, the noble with the savage, the ego with the wound. And that's not a comfortable process, it's a crucifixion of everything false within you. Think about it. How often do we edit ourselves to appear good? How often do we suppress our rage, deny our envy, mask our fear just to stay acceptable to others, and even to ourselves? But Nietzsche says, stop lying. Not just to the world, but to yourself. Because every time you deny your darkness, you give it more power. Every time you run from the abyss, it grows deeper, and eventually it owns you. That's why so many people feel fractured, anxious, burned out, not because they're weak, but because they're at war with themselves. They've split their soul in half. They've banished the parts they don't like and tried to build a life with what's left. But a half-life isn't living, it's surviving. And Nietzsche didn't want you to survive. He wanted you to transform. So how do you do that? You stop being afraid of the monster. You become conscious of it. You stare into the mirror, not the filtered version, not the curated identity, but your actual reflection. The one that's messy, brutal, wild, uncontrollable. The part of you that's capable of selfishness, cruelty, obsession, lust, wrath. Not to indulge it, not to justify it, but to own it. Because here's the paradox Nietzsche understood. Only those who have faced their capacity for darkness can truly choose the light. The rest are just pretending. They're behaving, not becoming. They're performing morality, not embodying it. And when things fall apart, when the mask slips, they shatter because they were never whole to begin with. This is why Nietzsche's philosophy is not for the faint of heart. It's not a feel-good message. It's a dare to stop running, a dare to stop blaming, a dare to stop outsourcing your identity to systems, ideologies, routines, and instead create yourself from the inside out. But that process begins in the mirror, in the abyss, in the place where you meet the parts of yourself you've been avoiding since childhood. And when you finally face them, when you have the courage to say, yes, that's part of me too, you start to unlock a new kind of power. Not control over others, not dominance, but integration. The ability to act consciously, not react unconsciously. The ability to choose how you show up, not because you're perfect, but because you're aware. Nietzsche would argue that most suffering in life doesn't come from what happens to us, it comes from our resistance to who we are. The shame we carry for not being good enough, the guilt we feel for having dark thoughts, and the pressure to be morally pure in a world that is anything but. But what if you stopped trying to be good and started trying to be real? What if you realized that your flaws aren't barriers to growth, they are the growth? That your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your map. You can't kill your darkness, you can only bring it into the light. And once you do, it doesn't control you anymore. It becomes part of your power. That's the secret few are willing to face. Your greatest strength comes not from perfection, but from integration. The person who has met their monster and made peace with it is more powerful than the person who's never been tested, because they're not living in fear of their own collapse. They've already collapsed and rebuilt. So I'll ask you this: what are you still hiding from yourself? What truth are you still too afraid to say out loud? What part of you are you pretending doesn't exist so you can keep up appearances? And what would really happen if you stopped pretending? If you let the monster speak, let the shadow breathe, and chose to meet it not with judgment, but with curiosity. That's the Nietzschean path. Not self-help, not self-denial, but self-confrontation. The kind that burns away everything false and leaves you, finally, with yourself. And from that place, from that raw, honest, terrifying place, you can begin to live. Not as a saint, not as a slave to your instincts, but as a creator, a human being who has faced the abyss, integrated the monster, and emerged not pure, but whole, falling in love with everything that tried to break you. Imagine this: everything you've ever cursed, everything you've ever wished away, the heartbreaks, the betrayals, the losses, the failures, all of it wasn't just necessary, but perfect. Imagine for a moment that the very things you thought were breaking you were sculpting you into something you couldn't yet imagine. That's not optimism. That's not delusion. That's Amor Fati, one of Nietzsche's most powerful and misunderstood ideas. It means love of fate, not tolerance of fate, not grudging acceptance of what happens, but love. Love for everything that is, exactly as it is, including the pain, including the chaos, including the moments that shattered you. Because in Nietzsche's eyes, to truly become powerful, you must stop resisting life and start embracing it in its totality. Now, let's be clear. Amor Fati is not passive. It's not about rolling over and saying, well, I guess this is just how life is. No, it's active, it's fierce. It's a conscious, defiant decision to say yes to life, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. This is where most people break. Most people can accept the good. Some can even endure the bad. But to love it all, to say, yes, I needed this pain. Yes, I needed this loss. Yes, I would live it again, that takes something deeper than strength. It takes vision. It takes the ability to see not just what's happening, but what it's making you. Amor Fati is the ultimate expression of philosophical maturity. It says, I don't just accept the fire, I fall in love with being forged. Think about your own life. Go back to the moment that broke you, the moment everything fell apart. Maybe it was a breakup, a death, a failure so deep it rewrote your identity. What happened after that? Who did you become? What did you learn that you never could have known without that suffering? Nietzsche would say, that's the point. Life didn't fail you. It was training you. Every scar is a seed. Every heartbreak is an invitation. Every collapse is a doorway into the next version of you. But only if you choose to walk through it with eyes open. Only if you stop asking life to be different and start asking, how can I become someone who can love this? This is not easy. It's not supposed to be. Amor Fati is not for people who want comfort. It's for people who want freedom. Because true freedom is not the absence of pain, it's the ability to choose your response to it. It's the ability to turn your suffering into art, into wisdom, into fuel. And here's the real kicker. When you practice Amor Fati, life stops being a threat. Nothing can break you when you decide that everything is part of your becoming. You lose someone? Amor Fati. You fail? Amor Fati. You get betrayed, rejected, humiliated, crushed, or Amor Fati. Because all of it is shaping something in you that ease never could. Nietzsche modeled this. His life was not a success story by conventional standards, but he died alone, misunderstood, mentally broken. But look at what he created through that pain. Look at the depth of insight that emerged from his suffering. Do you really think he could have written what he did from a place of comfort? No, his agony was his ink. His madness was his muse. And what he left us is a map not to happiness, but to meaning. A map that says, stop fighting life. Stop editing your story. Stop trying to make it cleaner, safer, easier. Instead, live it all. Feel it all. And love it all. Because everything that tried to break you is the reason you're still becoming. So here's the final, most radical question Nietzsche would ask you if you had to live your exact life over again, exactly as it happened. Every moment, every mistake, every heartbreak, every regret, would you say yes? Not just tolerate it, not just endure it, but say with full conviction, yes, I would live it again. Give me the same suffering and the same losses. I love it all. That's Amor Fati. That's the highest form of self-love, not the kind that says, I am enough, but the kind that says, everything that made me was necessary. And that is the dark reason Nietzsche embraced suffering, not because he liked pain, not because he was a masochist, but because he saw what suffering could create. He saw that without it, we remain hollow, safe, unchanged. But with it, with real, conscious, chosen suffering, we become something else, something rare, something unbreakable, something real. So ask yourself, right now, what in your life are you still resisting? What part of your story are you still trying to edit or erase? And what would happen if you dropped the resistance and simply said, yes, I love this too? Because that sentence spoken in the face of pain is the most powerful thing a human being can say. It's the moment you stop surviving your life and begin owning it. And when you do, when you fall in love with everything that tried to break you, you don't just find peace. You find power. Real, grounded, irreversible power. The kind that no one can take away because you found it in the one place no one else can follow, your own suffering. And you emerged with a smile.